I mean, it's an interesting tax, isn't it? Because it doesn't affect everyone, but I think everyone thinks it's just a bit unfair.
It's a very interesting tax, and you put your finger on it earlier when you said that it's considered sort of anti-aspiration inheritance tax. Because, yes, although actually only 4% of deaths end up incurring inheritance tax, 30% of people think that they will have to pay inheritance tax. So even if they won't be affected by it, they think they will and don't like the idea of it. And also there's this point which one of our viewers raised about the idea of being taxed on something that you've already been taxed on. So scrapping inheritance tax polls incredibly well, but doesn't affect very many people, which means it's a sort of win-win for the government, because they'll only have to spend about £7 billion on abolishing inheritance tax, but it would go down extremely well in some of these blue wall seats in the south of England. And I think our viewer was right to say that it probably won't go down that well in the red wall. But now the Tories are worried about those sort of core Tory votes in the south of England, which they think they could lose. And they've actually identified 32 seats which they think they're in danger of losing, and which they think a scrapping inheritance tax could help them to win.
Well, the Tories are still well behind in the polls, aren't they? And as you say, this is a popular policy, especially amongst core Tory voters in the south of England, which this would most likely affect. Do you think it is likely that this will be a manifesto pledge?
Well, at the moment, Rishi Sunak is distancing himself from it. He's saying that the priority now is to cut inflation. And already we're hearing economic experts piling in. I think it was Paul Johnson from the IFS saying that this should not be a priority now. It would be mad. The only way that they could possibly have decided that they can afford this is if they're budgeting far, far too tightly. So I think if Rishi Sunak is already feeling quite nervous about it and is then warned against it by various economists, I think it's relatively unlikely that it will get into the manifesto. But I'm not certain, because there will be lots and lots of Conservative MPs who would love to see inheritance tax scrap put back, and we can see that they've all been. There's a Telegraph, the paper of the Conservative Party. They've been running a campaign for weeks now to get inheritance tax scrapped, and they've had 50, 60 Conservative MPs line up behind them signing it. So it could be that Rishi Sunak is under so much pressure from his own backbenchers that he gives in and does put this on the manifesto.
So, I mean, in effect, they're running it up the flagpole. Is that what all this is?
I think so, yeah. They're testing the waters, seeing how it goes down with the public, and then they'll decide what they do about it.
Well, it is cheaper than taking 2 pence off income tax, isn't it? I mean, you can see why it might be the option to go for.
Well, absolutely. It's pretty much half the price of taking 2p off income tax. And the problem with taking 2p off income tax is costs a lot of money, and the worry is that people won't really see the benefit because it'll just be eaten up in this massive, massive increase to mortgages. So, yeah, great, you've got a couple of £1,000, a couple of £100 probably less income tax per year. But if you're paying thousands of pounds more in your mortgage, you really won't notice that at all. Whereas inheritance tax won't affect very many people, but people will think, great, I'm not taxed for dying anymore, in theory, and that is a good thing.